So moving right along to Chapter 2, you would think we'd pick up kind of around where we're making our kinetic mechanisms, but no. We are actually going to start over here, which, okay, is actually close to where we initially started, but this is where we're making our Certus Quartz seeds. Now, you're going to need an initial amount of Certus Quartz from the overworld or from trading to start this off, but what you do is you take some Certus Quartz, you put it through a millstone, and then you get your Certus Quartz dust. You combine that dust with sand, and you get a Certus Quartz seed. You actually get 2 Certus Quartz seeds. This is to ensure that you can keep duplicating this stuff instead of having to go and constantly mine for raw Certus Quartz. And you can see that we have some of that process automated here, but we'll get into it as we go through the system. So here is our initial Certus Quartz seed. Because of how Certus Quartz seeds work, they require a certain number of pumps of water to grow into the next step. I forget if it's 3 or 16, but it is a number of pumps of water. And so we have our initial stage here that gets put into this storage drawer, which is a remnant of early filtering. So as you can see, we're using just andesite funnels here. This is where the initial seed grows up into the first stage. And because we're putting this into a storage drawer, we can automatically filter on, is this, stage 1? If so, andesite funnel pulls it in. Really nice, really compact. Stage 2 growing, and stage 3 growing, where it grows into the finalized pure Certus Quartz crystal, which is here. Again, stockpile switch to turn the water on and off. And there are things that if I knew about stockpile switches, I might have done this slightly differently, but we'll talk about that when we talk about that. But while we're on the subject of water, this is how I'm generating water. We've got several aqueous accumulators. I don't quite remember the recipe off the top of my head, but they work by, if you surround them with at least 2, I think, sources of water, they will start to infinitely generate water themselves. This is because it's based off of the Minecraft principle, where if you have 2 diagonal or spaced apart water sources, then the middle one will also become a water source. And so it relies on that principle of infinite water, just modified into a form that you can pump out. So I've gone overkill. I believe I have 9 aqueous accumulators here, and those are once again getting powered by water wheels that I just built into the floor here. And those are getting pumped at rapid velocity up into this tank. Now, the reason I did that is because up above on floor 2, I had a lot of flow rate issues where I was trying to supply the entire floor with just 2... I don't remember exactly how many pumps I have upstairs, but the point is, it was not nearly enough for the amount of water that I required through the rest of my factory. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm kind of realizing that maybe I might even split these in-depth episodes into smaller chapters themselves, which will push back Vault Hunters, but I'm realizing that this is probably going to turn into an hour or 2, and to edit that much at one time is going to be impossible with Final Fantasy around the corner. And this is in fact airing on day 2 of my stream, if I remember correctly. Or this will technically air the week after that. You'll hear this rambling later. So the point is, I think this is going to be in multiple parts. And so we have the water, as I said. We've got a clutch specifically so that if the water is not needed by our contraption, it doesn't pump. So we just have a lot of water. I really should do something like put a clutch in downstairs too. Not because it'll save like rotational power up here, because, I've got a separate source down there. But I think it might help with lag if those aren't constantly trying to pump when this isn't needed. But So we have our fully grown pure Certus quartz crystals. Now we have a brass tunnel here that is equally splitting into, yeah, I set this at 48 because I needed a multiple of 3, but I'm also splitting that in half or whatever. So theoretically we'd have 24 here, 24 here, and then that would get split into 3 here, which, you know, would be 8, 8, and 8. So that's why I put a double split, more or less. And you do need a split to send half of your Certus quartz back into the grindstone to make the quartz dust, to mix with the sand, to make more seeds, and make sure that this entire loop is sustainable. Now, due to how I made this particular module, unfortunately, I've coupled it just a little too tightly, and that means that I can't actually turn this part off without also shutting off the conveyor belt that goes into, that delivers the crystals from this side of the setup into the next module, and that's very bad. With a little more foresight, I could potentially, like, I guess move this chain drive back, put the clutch over here, and then that way it should, in theory, just power... No, never mind, because then I'd get into issues with the conveyor belt on this half of the thing. So the point is, I've tightly coupled this just a little too much, and that means that I can't turn it off, or else this module will never get any Certus quartz. So that's a flaw. Definitely to be redesigned when I make the mega base. But that is our quartz growing operation. The next set that I think makes sense to go into, we've already done water as well, is Skystone Dust. Yes. So that is over here. We talked about this the other day. We have Skystone, I believe, a stack in each of these things. I could check. I could just go back into my body and just walk over here and look at these things. But I believe we have a stack, or at the very least, a minimum of 1 to 3 Skystone in each of these. And so that means that we've constantly got something that we can be grinding. As I mentioned in the original video, Skystone Dust also emits Skystone as a product or whatever, so you can think of Skystone as more of a catalyst. It's never consumed in the reaction. Skystone Dust is the product that's actually useful that we need. So the Skystone gets separated back out. You can use a brass tunnel like a filter, and because we're splitting it, this is also how we ensure that both sides still have Skystone. What was happening originally is that one side was getting more Skystone than the other, and I think that still occurs, but we've got enough of a buffer that it doesn't really matter. And so that just ensures that this side doesn't run out too fast. Or at all, I should say. So that is our Skystone Dust. It gets output to the Volatile Sky Solution. And that's a pretty simple recipe. It's just mixing water with the Skystone Dust. You can see that we've got basins here. We are pumping in water through the bottom of the basins, and this was some tricky routing, let me tell you, because if you're trying to input a fluid and output a fluid into a block adjacent to it, that is to say these item drains, you basically need to use your wrench to turn these things into see-through, or, you know, the glass fluid pipes, and that ensures that they don't connect to the blocks next to them. Glass pipes are always straight. And so that means that we can extract water when the Skystone Dust is on. Ooh, bit of a frame dip there for some reason. I'm guessing the server might be saving. But we get water through bottom of basin. We get split Skystone Dust here. And then that mixes up. Once again, it's all hooked to, I don't think stockpile switches. Or if it is, it's hooked to a stockpile switch later in the device or whatever. So basically when I need destabilized redstone, perhaps? Yes. When it needs destabilized redstone, that also governs when the Volatile Sky Solution turns on. Yes, here it is. And that is one of the things that I wish I'd known about stockpile switches earlier. You can read tanks. So we can turn this on and off when we're low on Destabilized Redstone, and because we make the Volatile Sky Solution at a fast enough rate, it doesn't matter that we don't exactly have a buffer of it. We just put one in here because, like with the spruce trees, you start getting into problems with routing, effectively. But that is the Volatile Sky Solution. Because we're in the same general neighborhood, we are now going to do Destabilized Redstone, which also means we are going to do our Quartz charging loop. So Destabilized Redstone, as I mentioned above, and one thing that I forgot to mention over here, but also applies over here, is that basins can drain directly into item drains. And so we input our charged quartz crystals, and these have to be the mined versions. So you can either get those from trading or mining, but these need to be raw. You don't want the grown crystal variety. These have to be natural. You charge them up using the AE2 charging devices, which we'll go over shortly. And then they get put into the basin with the Volatile Sky Solution. They get mixed up. Note this setup here, you can also mix mixers through things, and potentially also presses. Don't quote me on that. Deployers can kind of go through stuff too. We'll see an example of that later. But you can see that we're routing our Volatile Sky Solution through the top of this so that we can avoid having the same issue down on the other side there. And also, this is already just up, so it makes sense not to waste as much pipe by routing ourselves back under the basins. But that outputs Destabilized Redstone and the raw quartz output uncharged. So you can think of the charged Certus quartz as our catalyst. It just loses its charge. And then, because this is an item drain, what it'll do is output the quartz. And then the quartz will roll across to the other side, which is why we have our conveyor belt here. And I make use of this in Chapter 3, which we'll go over when we get there. But in the meantime, this outputs Destabilized Redstone and the uncharged quartz. This is where we get into our charging loop. So the uncharged quartz goes here. I don't think this is entirely necessary, but I just put in a bunch of buffers just in case. And that also allows us to put more crystals into the system if we really need to. Right now we have enough crystals that we don't, but we get into our charging loop. So we've got a splitter out back because we have 3 chargers. We just have andesite funnels going into each of those chargers because it can only accept one item. And the charger from Applied Energistics is really nice because it will detect when a crystal is uncharged and only accept that as an input, and when it is charged, that is when it puts it into the output slot like a hopper can recognize. So anything that's in here is not at risk of outputting until it's charged. Very nice. Love that. Once this is charged, it gets output, and we come up the diagonal conveyor belt back into our thing. But let's talk about how we are powering the chargers. Lava, hellbark tree, extractor, arboreal extractor. And this is kind of hungry enough that, at least when I initially started making it, before I had all of this container, backlog, I needed 2 hellbark logs, or hellbark trees. The problem with hellbark trees is they very seldom grow tall like this. So how to arboreal extract a hellbark log? A tree, dang it. What I did was, I put my block of dirt up where this hellbark log that I'm looking at was, grew my hellbark tree, and then as long as you have a surplus of hellbark logs, you can just extend the tree. And these arboreal extractors will still think of it as a default tree as long as the log you're connected to has naturally generated leaves on it. And so that's how you can basically put these arboreal extractors on trees that are otherwise not suitable for arboreal extractors, and that is how I did my early infinite lava. So we're pumping lava into these magmatic dynamos, and we're using Invar conduits that I had to buy from trading. I think I bought the Invar specifically from trading. So this was a really expensive buy, but We also have these redstone links attached to the same frequency to charge the crystals, or, generate destabilized redstone from the charged crystals. And so that means that the magmatic dynamos are also off and not consuming lava when they're not needed. But when they are, they turn on. And of course, we've got our Invar stuff. If you're connecting, well, okay, we'll go into that when we get to that. But that means that each of these is getting a sufficient amount of power and charging the crystals quite nicely. And we also, I can't do it from here, but we have a backlog of crystals in these hoppers too, so we're just set for crystals. So that is crystals, that is also destabilized redstone done. And you would think we'd move straight into rose quartz, and actually you'd be right, let's do that. So we pump the destabilized redstone into the bottom of our basins before. We also have our pure Certus quartz crystals that get put into the mixers, and you mix them up rose quartz. That's a fairly straightforward process. We've already talked about how mixers work, so I've kind of just abbreviated that step in this chain. Now you'll notice that basins can also output to conveyor belts. They can also output to depots and a couple other things that are in Create, and you'll see these automatic connection points form like that. Now, because this is a belt and not an item drain or other fluid-bearing thing, we will only ever get the product of this reaction out of that, which is to say, the rose quartz. Now, this is the part where we skip over to here. Here, we have a Cobblestone Generator, and it's based on the principles of vanilla cobblestone generation. We have lava above all of this. This is a unique thing that I found in that video that I mentioned earlier, actually, is that you use stairs, waterlogged stairs, to function as your water source, and because of that, it still detects as if there's a water source next to a lava thing, and it doesn't turn this back into, like stone or anything like that. It doesn't evaporate this. It just makes the cobblestone. And so, if this were on, and this is just on a manual switch because I, had issues with stockpile switches and storage drawers, as I mentioned in the original video, we can get lots of cobble really fast. Now, like I mentioned when talking about the andesite layer, you can't make these drills go over above, I forget if it's like 60 RPM, 64. That's like the sweet spot where any faster and your cobblestone starts flying all over the place because it starts to generate at the same time it's getting broken, and that's natural Minecraft physics where entities floating inside of blocks will get shot up, and the point is, make sure that these aren't too fast. So, storage drawer with a void upgrade. Into crushing wheels. Crushing wheels are the big brother of the millstone. They also, in most cases, have an increased output. So, in this case, no, I'm pretty sure it's just one cobblestone to one gravel, but in other cases when you're like crushing ore, then that is potentially where you're going to get some yield increases. So, when this is on, crusher crushes into gravel, gravel gets washed by washer, and makes iron nuggets and flint. Now, this operates on the same principle as the blasters earlier that we were using with the lava to cook stuff. It's just that if you put a fan through water, it washes the thing instead. This is in base create as well, so you're gonna probably come up against a lot of these mechanics in other packs as well. And I'm really looking forward to getting over to my trading location, because I've got some really cool stuff that I'm doing with, I think, content observers and these depots to streamline this cooking process even further. But anyway, so we've got a filter on our brass funnel? Yeah, brass funnel. So that it only outputs the iron nuggets into this hopper. We also have a void upgrade here, but this is a compacting drawer. So that means that we take this ingots, or nuggets, yes. And that automatically compacts it into the highest possible thing. So that means that we've got iron blocks. That also means that if I were to click on any of these other components, though, you can get iron in whichever form you want. So basically we're set for life on iron, and we can just output it as whatever we like. Now, in the case of my Tinker's Construct stuff here, we're just outputting iron ingots because that's kind of the nicest unit of measurement here. And we're just doing that by funnel directly into, I think this is called an item. You know what? This is important enough that I'm going to get out of free cam real quick and walk over to it so that we can look at it. This is a seared chute, and that will accept items, and I don't know if it can output items, but it can certainly accept them. And given the fact that this is meant to smelt stuff into liquids, I think it's input only, but that's okay. Here, of course, Tinker's Construct, we have our controller, which is, you know, the brains of the operation. It shows the lava gauge, it shows what fluids we have in here, and in this case, we're full up on molten iron. Going back into FreeCam, you can also see that we have lava tank back here, and we're just pumping our lava from all the way... Oh, actually, another hellbark tree here. So this was useful for supplementing the power generation over there, and also supplying enough lava, which is, you know, fairly slow actually, to the Tinker's Construct smeltery. Yes, that's the word. Seared drain is what we're using to output this stuff, and this is something that I learned in Infinity Evolved. As long as you are capable of pumping fluids from a seared drain, you can use any mod pipe to pump molten stuff out. And moreover, you can also use any pipe to smelt or cast molten stuff. So sure, we've got this surplus of iron over here for the rest of the chapter, but while we were doing this, I had the foresight to put in casts for sheets, bars, and gears. And those are used frequently enough that it was worth it. Now, we are back here. We have molten iron. We have spout with molten iron. I'm talking like B-dubs now. You take your rose quartz, you put it under the spout. I combined spout and smelt just there. Rose quartz plus spout plus lava equals electron tube or whatever it's called. And as you can see that we've got our stockpile switch here, which determines whether or not I think we output over here. I'm actually not sure this does anything. Oh, yes it does. Okay, that determines whether or not... Aha! I think it determines whether or not this belt runs. Don't quote me on that. But it also obviously turns on or off this cogwheel. And so, we get to the next mechanism. This is a precision mechanism? Yes, precision mechanism. So, recipe for precision mechanism is one electron tube, and then a screwdriver. And then precision mechanism. And before we move too far away from our body, I'm going to get closer to the center of the factory so that theoretically we can retain the benefits of both the one probe and our free cam. Yeah. So now we have precision mechanism, and because I'm using it in multiple places once again, we are putting it out into this storage drawer, which is then going into the top of a tunnel. And this is a nice thing. You can input through the top of a tunnel. Potentially even the... Well, no, you can't do the bottom because tunnels only go directly on top of conveyor belts. So we're using this tunnel to split out into Chapter 3 and, of course, Chapter 2A, which is where we're actually going next. Now, I talked about Chapter 2A a little bit in the faster tour, so it doesn't require a whole lot of repetition here. We have pistons to break our different types of vines. We've got the twisting vines and the weeping vines. Those are in the nether in very specific biomes. I recommend making a nature's compass to find that. And so, then, as I talked about, we have a vacuumlator. Okay, I guess we're at the range of our free cam here. where it's not quite functioning properly. But we have a vacuumlator, which is sucking in the drops from these weeping vines. You'll also notice that these are, of course, planted on soul sand, because I'm pretty sure that's required. Then, we have a mechanical arm powering the entirety of this operation. And once again, lots more lava, because this is Chapter 2A, we're making infernal mechanisms, you need lava for it. You need a blaze burner to make infernal mechanisms. Blaze burners accept any, I believe, furnace fuel, as well as blaze cakes if you want them to be superheated. We do not need this one to be superheated, so I figured lava is best fuel because we can get a lot of it, and it's, you know, something that you can do in a cycle. Now, spout above depot can be used to either, you know, make a recipe, or can be used to fill bucket with fluid. So, we have, again, our deployer, which has to go through a block of glass to power the blaze burner, because when the system is on, it doesn't know that the blaze burner needs feeding or not. If this were a later version to create, you could just use the mechanical arm to put buckets into an open blaze burner, but you can't in this one, I don't think. So, you get lava bucket into deployer. The first time it does it, it will turn the blaze burner on, and this will be heated. However, when we get another filled bucket of lava here, it will try to put in blaze burner, realize, oh no, this is full, and then it will deploy lava. And that's bad in middle of factory. So by putting a glass block here, we prevent the deploying of lava in the factory. Now, let's get into the lava loop. This funnel has a filter for empty bucket, so that means it takes it out of the deployer, puts it here. The mechanical arm sees this depot as output, and it sees this funnel as input. So it takes empty bucket from depot, puts it in here, onto this depot. And you'll note that I can't just put it directly on the depot because A, you need a filter in order to specify where you're putting objects in a depot, otherwise the mechanical arm will just do whatever it wants. So it puts it in this funnel, empty goes under the depot, gets filled with lava, comes up here, is grabbed by mechanical arm and put back into deployer, because it can treat deployers as inputs. So that's, you know, a little time savings there. But also, you can see that we've got these depots where we get our different types of vines, and the mechanical arm can just reach the one in the back. And so, we're on a round robin. It grabs both of these types of filters. We've got a nice bit of compaction here, if I do say so myself. We've got a brass funnel with a filter on it for both of these types of vines. That prevents the mechanical arm from putting empty bucket in here. And because mixers can go through stuff, that also means that we can input stuff directly into the basin and then still mix through it. And of course, to make soul, liquid soul, you just need the different types of vines in a heated basin mixed up, and bada boom, you get your liquid soul. The liquid soul plus lava gets pumped over to here, and this is one of the easier secondary recipes in my personal opinion. You pump liquid soul on top of precision mechanism, then you pump 3 lava times onto your precision mechanism, and then it becomes an infernal mechanism. Now obviously this isn't operational right this second because we're full up on infernal mechanisms, but the thing that I learned about spouts and conveyor belts specifically is that if you have a recipe that requires multiple spouting things, then they will continue to move along and not stop if, you know, they've got more stages to do or whatever. So I thought originally I could just use one lava spout 3 times, and I probably could if there was a depot involved. And actually I'm realizing that I could potentially refactor that such that we have a depot here with a lava spout here, and then just only accept infernal mechanisms here. But at this point I have 3 spouts and this just looks cooler anyway, so that's why we're doing this. It might potentially be a little bit slower, but I'm not entirely sure, don't quote me on that. Anyway, that's the recipe for Chapter 2A. This has been Chapters 2 and 2A of the Create Above and Beyond Starter Base Tour. Chapters 3 and Extra will release on Saturday, July 13th. If you're new to the channel, please consider liking, subscribing, and clicking that bell to be notified. As always, I'm looking forward to your feedback in the comments below. And with that, I will catch you on the flip side. Thanks for watching, everybody.